Apple yesterday announced two M1 chips and a superpowered, like massively superpowered 16-inch MacBook Pro at their Unleashed event. Apple announced two new chips. You know, they came out with the M1 about 11 months ago, November 2020. And that chip performed twice as fast as the latest PC laptop chips while using less power. And that is the key for a laptop, isn't it? You want more power, but less power consumption. So you want to be able to process more graphics while not draining your battery. Specialized chips will do better at this task as opposed to general chips. And we are very far into the silicon race here. We're in the fifth or sixth decade of making these chips, 70s, 80s, 90s. Yeah. So, you know, we're now into the sixth decade of making these kind of chips for PCs. And everybody knows that the key issue is battery life that we all contend with. And because Apple was building off of over 1 billion iOS devices, they really got to optimize chips and they went full stack. If Apple is not dependent on Intel or AMD or other chip manufacturers, it makes it a stronger and more valuable company. And that's what you see over time. Companies build full stack. Tesla, one of the greatest examples of this. They make their own battery packs. They don't take them from Panasonic or whoever anymore. I think in the beginning, they were using actually Panasonic batteries in the Roadster. And so if you want to have a company that is less dependent on third parties and you want to capture more of the margin in your product, why give that margin to other players in the space? Because they have to make their $100 or $200 off of a chip. That's why PCs, if you had an Intel chip versus an AMD versus some, generic chip, they could have a difference of $100, $200. So there is a financial incentive here, but there's also how do we make the best possible experience for our consumer base? What does their consumer base do? Well, they're not gamers as much as they are video editors and creators and creatives. That's always been who the Mac ecosystem goes after. Why? Because if you're a creator, you appreciate something beautiful. It was Steve Jobs' passion. And those people who are creatives are price insensitive. They're price insensitive. If you are making content on your computer, you're a video editor, you're a screenplay writer, an author, you're making money making content. This is the content creation device. So that's part of the secret. You're not just using it for email. If you're using it for email, yeah, buy a Chromebook. You're going to be able to spend $500, and there's no difference between doing email on a $3,000 machine or a $500. Big difference doing video editing. Big difference doing photography, etc. And so let's talk a little bit about these two new chips. One's called the M1 Pro. One's called the M1 Max. Confusing branding here, but you see where they're going. They're going to have three chips. The chips will have different profiles in terms of power. Here you can see, I guess that's the physical representation in terms of size. And that is indicative of what they're capable of doing. And here's a 40-second clip explaining the specs of the M1 Max chip, specifically 39 seconds. I'll see you on the other side.
M1 Max starts with a much higher bandwidth on-chip fabric and doubles the memory interface once again. This delivers up to 400 gigabytes per second of memory bandwidth. That's twice M1 Pro and 6 times M1. This wider memory interface lets the M1 custom package support up to 64 gigabytes of unified memory. And its die has a staggering 57 billion transistors. That's 1.7 times M1 Pro and 3.5 times M1. It's the largest chip we've ever built by far. M1 Max has the same powerful 10-core CPU complex of M1 Pro and doubles the GPU to a massive 32 cores, giving M1 Max up to 4 times faster GPU performance than M1.
All right, so as you can see, it's massively faster and more powerful. And they are using less power than like these 8-core PC chips. So to get the same amount of PC graphics, you can do it, but it's going to have a higher power profile, which means your machine is going to have the battery die very quickly. And in an April earnings call, Tim Cook warned that the global chip shortage would impact Apple's M1 chips and the products associated with them. According to Apple rumors, all Apple chips, including the new M1s, are manufactured at TSMC. If you're wondering what the T stands for, it's Taiwan. And if you've been listening to All In or this podcast, we had Jacob on recently to talk about Taiwan. Been watching the news, you know that Taiwan has a bunch of Chinese airplanes flying around in the South China Sea. You have military maneuvers with the Big Six, New Zealand, Australia, Japan, the UK, the United States. and South Korea. I think those are the big six in the South Pacific. And they are, of course, now trying to at least let China know that we're not going to let you roll Taiwan. And I think the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, TSMC, is a big part of this. If you just think about that one company, $500 billion company, produces a lot of the world's silicon. It is, if you want to talk about supply chain interruption, if China takes over TSMC and they take over Taiwan, if they take over Taiwan and by extension, they might just seize TSMC. And you say to yourself, that's crazy. Governments don't just seize companies. Isn't that what they just did in China? So a lot of what's happening here in terms of the independence of Taiwan could have something to do with TSMC. As part of that, Japan is subsidizing a $7 billion plant that TSMC is building. Sony's an investor in it as well, in Japan. And TSMC is also building a plant, I believe, in Arizona here in the United States. And so what we're going to see is different governments spending money with TSMC to move their factories to secure locations. This would be a great thing for Australia, New Zealand, Korea, other countries to do. If we can make TSMC a global company with a global footprint of factories, that would make the supply chain much more resilient, and everybody has a horse in that race, including China. Where's Apple in all this? Apple has $250 billion in cash last time I checked, well over $200 billion. Why doesn't Apple just buy TSMC? I guess that would be considered a real hostile act by the Chinese government. And why doesn't Apple give $7 billion to TSMC to build a plant, in Vietnam or Korea or somewhere else? Again, the Chinese philosophy of war and interactions is just saying that Taiwan is its own sovereign country. That would be considered, according to the doctrines in China, an act of war, based on what I've read. If you want to watch the Jacob Hellberg episode, it was episode 1303 just last week, and a great new book from him. So totally worth watching. When you're trying to nail an important project, you're going to need some extra help, right? You're trying to move fast. You're a startup. Well, Fiverr Business puts a world of expert freelancers at your fingertips so you can get any project across the finish line and be really proud of your work. Plus, you'll get everything you need to seamlessly integrate your new team members into your workflow. We love Fiverr here at Launch. We've hired a bunch of researchers to find local founders to invite to different launch events. That was one of my secret weapons. So stop wasting your time searching for creative talent. Just leave it to Fiverr Business. Their team of dedicated business success managers help match you with the best talent for your team. There's no more endless guessing and interviews and people disappearing. That was always my problem because freelancers were so unreliable. Well, not anymore. Use Fiverr for Business and you will not have that problem. Plus, you can save and share your favorite freelancers for future projects. So, find the right freelancers you need to give your next project just the boost it needs to finish strong. Right now, you can sign up for Fiverr Business absolutely free for the first year. Get 1 year free and save 10% on your purchase of Fiverr Business with the promo code JASON. Yes, that's right, JASON. Just go to fiverr.com/business, 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 and don't forget to use that promo code JASON.